VikesNow, I am Dustin Baker. We are mere hours from Vikings-Bears. The Vikings are 6-5. The Bears are 3-8. And the playoff wildcard positioning is really at stake for the Vikings tonight. It can swing by about 24%. They need to win. They probably should win, and then they'll make a little bit of NFL history if they win. The Vikings would be the 13th to cover the 13th team to cover the point spread this week, which would set an NFL record. So we shall see if they're trustworthy enough to do that. But I'm heading up there, leaving my home in about 1 hour. But I want to talk about this Lewis Cine stuff. Every time the Baltimore Ravens are on primetime television, it's like this bees to honey topic to discuss the Vikings not drafting Kyle Hamilton, which I understand. Kyle Hamilton is a wonderful football player, and that, in fact, was the guy that I wanted them to draft and not trade back. But I do not understand why anytime there's an opportunity to pounce and to talk about Lewis Cine and Kyle Hamilton, why it's necessary. It's in the rear view. So the next 10 minutes or so are going to discuss this topic, and maybe you're a newcomer to this idea of Lewis Cine, why he doesn't play, or why Kyle Hamilton should be on the Vikings. So let's get it out in the open. During Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's first NFL draft, he had an old scouting staff, which has since been replaced by his scouting staff. The Vikings owned the 12th overall pick, and Kyle Hamilton was a sure thing coming out of Notre Dame, a safety. And the Vikings could have just stayed put and drafted him. Most of us wanted them to do that. They did not. They traded back and later that evening drafted Lewis Cine with the 32nd overall pick. So the Vikings, through the fruit of their trades on that night, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's first night on the job in an NFL draft, they ended up getting Lewis Cine, Andrew Booth, Ed Ingram, Brian Asamoah, Usezi Odamewo, and Ty Chandler. That was the fruit of all of their Kwesi's trades that evening. Cine, Booth, Ingram, Asezi, Asamoah, and Ty Chandler. While the Lions got Jameson Williams, Josh Paschal, a edge rusher, and to the Packers, Christian Watson. That was all the trade spoils. So it's important to look at a lens of what all those trades led to, because we look at it as Cine only, while the other NFC North teams got Jameson Williams and Christian Watson. No, the Vikings ended up through a spiral of trades getting Booth, Ingram, Asamoah, Asezi, and Chandler. And Asezi is the only one who's not on the team anymore. So that was the trade itself. The main criticism of the trade was at the 12th overall pick, Kwesi had an opportunity to step on a team's neck and truly get a lot more trade value than he did. Alas, he did not. That was not a quarterback-heavy draft, so the price for trading up isn't what it would usually be. But again, every time the Ravens are on TV, it's like, oh, the Vikings should have drafted Kyle Hamilton. So the guy, Hamilton, is wonderful. Let's get that in the open. But who cares? That is in the past. Lewis Cine broke his leg in October of 2022 against the Saints in London and hasn't seen the field since. His injury recovery evidently went well, but he's just not used in the Vikings defense at all as a second-year player. Part of that is because, and this is one of my main beefs, while I can't understand why it's so insistent that we talk about Cine all the time, is the Vikings already have safety, that position covered. Out of nowhere, Josh Metellus turned into a starter. I don't know that Kwesi Adofo-Mensah knew that at the time. Maybe it's a Brian Flores special. But the Vikings have Harrison Smith, Cameron Bynum, and Josh Metellus. So I ask you, the Cine truther, who do you want to bench? Who's not playing anymore? Harrison Smith, Cameron Bynum, or Josh Metellus? Because in order to make room for Hamilton or Cine, you got to bench one of those guys, cut them. The Vikings already have good safeties. So this talker that we're going to lament Cine not playing or Hamilton not on the team, they've already got this position covered. Now, if they were down to bare nubbins and garbage at safety, yeah, I could see talking about it once a week or so. Why don't they play Cine, or why don't they have Hamilton? But the Vikings, this is one of their best spots, one of their deepest spots. They brought 6 safeties onto the roster for the opening day depth chart. And we're in November of that same season talking about why they don't have Kyle Hamilton. You wanted 7 safeties? Is that it? Let's look at another like draft example. In 2020, the Eagles infamously drafted Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. And hindsight would tell us that Justin Jefferson was a better draft pick by 1,000 times. But do you ever hear Eagles fans bemoaning, bitching about how they don't have Justin Jefferson? Maybe like a couple days after the 2020 season when Reagor was, floundering. But the Eagles, who could have drafted Justin Jefferson, now have Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown. They've moved on. They don't look in the past and be like, oh, woe is me. We're 10-1, but we could have had Justin Jefferson. Because they think, who cares? They've moved on. They've already got their wide receivers. So in the same vein that the Eagles have Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown, the Vikings have Harrison Smith, Cameron Bynum, and Josh Metellus, and Cine might even eventually play. So when a draft pick doesn't quite pan out as soon as you would like, if that position is already fortified with depth, which it is for these Vikings, it should be a relative nothing burger about, well, Cine isn't playing. You should just say, oh, well, the guy's not needed. That stinks that he isn't on the field, but hey, we got that position covered. Life is good. That should be your mindset and disqualify any daily takes about why Lewis Cine hasn't panned out. The Vikings, since they hired Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell, are 19-9, which is a top 5 NFL win percentage in the last 2 seasons. And so I can reveal that factoid to a Viking fan. Hey, the 2 new guys you hired have a top 5 win percentage since they came to the building. And that person will be like, yeah, but what about Lewis Cine? And it's like, why? What context, what impact does that have on the win and loss factoid that I just presented to you? No general manager gets every draft pick right. In fact, a dirty little secret is the draft is a total crapshoot. You're lucky if half of them end up being long-term starters. None of that doesn't even happen inside a specific draft. So I for some reason, when the Vikings hired Kwesi Adofo-Mensah on January 26, 2022, he became the first general manager in NFL history expected to hit on every draft pick. I don't know why we hold him to that standard. No other general manager has to deal with that. Even Howie Roseman from the Eagles has misses, in addition to the one with Jefferson in 2020. The sooner you can understand that not every general manager, even like the best of the best, gets the pick right, you're going to be more comfortable in your own skin when evaluating Kwesi Adofo-Mensah or Rick Spielman in the past or any of them henceforth. They just don't get it right all the time. That's why there's not like a Michael Jordan or there's not a GOAT general manager. It's because all of them have gaffes and bad trades and bad draft picks, because doing that job, scouting talent, and having it translate to NFL stardom is a crapshoot. What you should be doing is judging Kwesi Adofo-Mensah's long-term body of work based on that to that of his peers. You shouldn't be doing it, what is he, about 22 months on the job? And, he's brought in Ivan Pace and Jordan Addison, and still we singularly focus on Lewis Cine. You should look at the entire body of what he's done, plus the wins and losses, plus like what he's done with the salary cap and getting more flexible for this offseason and beyond. Because when you get to February, March, and April this year, and then the following year, you're going to be delighted to see all the cap space, and that's because of Adofo-Mensah's efforts to get right during this competitive rebuild. So look at his long-term body of work, not just the very first draft pick of his tenure, and if you insist on doing that, make sure you include the other fruits of the trade, whether that's Booth, Ingram, Asamoah, Ty Chandler, if he turns out to be something. And the other part here on Lewis Cine is that he's not dead. I have personally assigned like week 1 next year is when I need to figure out if Cine is truly garbage and a bust. I mean, the guy's leg snapped. So there is a long shot that he actually does need time to get totally back right. And by the time, I don't know if Harrison Smith's going to be on this football team next year, he could retire. But I think next year is my cutoff to determine, all right, was this Cine a total whiff? Because he still has time to get right. There are, 2.5 years left on his rookie contract, and we act like he's not on the team at all or that he won't be next year. The guy is young and has time to eventually play. On the whole, right now, heading into the Bears game, the Vikings defense ranks 9th in the NFL in efficiency. 9th per EPA per play. Where did that come from? Last year with Ed Donatel, we lamented all of the points allowed and all of the yards allowed. So the Vikings defense ranks 9th right now, and we're bitching about Lewis Cine. Think about that. You're not looking at the positive. You're not looking at the grander picture. You're taking a singular talker and being like, why doesn't he play? It just doesn't add up. If the defense was still where it was at with Donatel, sure, be my guest. Get mad about Cine. So let's grow up and talk about something else, not Lewis Cine every time you're bored. Talk about the playoff probability of this team. Talk about if you don't think this team is going to go too far in the postseason, you can start looking at mock drafts and such for next year. But not all about Lewis Cine all the time. All right, we'll be back later this week, and Skol, baby.